All right, hey, Algebra 2C people. This is lesson 7.5, part 1. We're going to break this up into 3 parts over 3 weeks for this distance learning business. So this week's going to focus on one thing. Now, this lesson 7.5, part 1 is solving rational equations. So it's working with a lot of the same stuff you've been working with, but now it's solving. Notice the 2 examples I have here, and there's a 3rd example over here. They now have equal signs in them, which means you're solving for x. As the directions also say, you're solving for x. This week's part 1 is specifically going to be focusing on one fraction equal to one fraction. Notice they're all that way. One fraction equal one fraction equal one fraction. That involves a specific solving type known as cross multiplication. You've done that before. Let me remind you how that works and why does that work? For example, you may or may not know the fraction 1/4 equals 3/12. 3/12 can be reduced to 1/4, but here's the thing. If you have a fraction equal to a fraction, the diagonals always multiply to the same number. So that diagonal multiplies to 12, that diagonal multiplies to 12, hence cross multiply equal. We use that fact here, here, and here to solve for x, because if this fraction truly equals this fraction, then this cross multiplication must equal that cross multiplication. Much like over here, 12 equals 12. One cross, the other cross. That's what we're going to use, and that's why it works. Okay? Now, I'm going to get that out of our way so you're not looking at that saying, what was that? But that was just a quick explanation of why cross multiplication works. So, over here, we're going to take this cross product equal to that cross product. And it doesn't matter what way you go first. You can do either diagonal. Now, what I kind of like to do is look ahead and say, which diagonal is going to give me the most x? I'll do that one first. So when I cross multiply here, this is going to give me 3x. When I cross here, it's going to give me 4x. I'm going to do that one first. So this cross multiplies 4x times 1, 4x. That must equal the other cross product. Now, when you multiply something like this, it is distributive property. So it's 3 times the x and 3 times the minus 2. So 3x minus 6. So just me personally, I like to have the most x on the left, and that way I'll be moving the smaller x to the bigger x. Hence, I'm going to be subtracting 3x from both sides to solve this equation. So over here, 4x minus 3x is 1x. That cancels, and that's just negative 6. So you kind of know how I operate in class, even though we were only together a whole whopping week. I usually start out with a relatively straightforward example, like the nicest it can kind of be, and there we go. So over to here, we're going to continue with the same process. Now if I just take a look ahead and say, hey, this 4 is going to multiply by this x being 4x, that 6 will multiply giving me 6x, I'm going to do the 6x part first. So I'll cross multiply this way. That's going to be 6 times x plus 6 times 2, 12. That has to equal the other cross multiplication, which is also distributive property. 4 times x, 4x. 4 times minus 2, minus 8. There's your equation. We're going to get the x's on the same side first, which is I'm going to subtract 4x from each side. That gives me 2x plus 12 equals negative 8. Sign goes along. And by the way, you will notice if x's need to be moved, that's always the first thing I move. Okay? Next is 2x plus 12 equals -8. We're on to basic solving. Subtract 12 from both sides. Divide by 2 is what's next. And I can see I'm going to be cramped for space here, so bear with me here. So minus 12. I get 2x equals -8 minus 12 is -20. I'm going to divide by 2. Divide by 2. And we get x equals -20 divided by 2, or -10. Okay? So there we go. Moving along. So those were what I would call fairly straightforward. It's solving you've done since pre-algebra, then algebra 1, and then even do that kind of solving in geometry. Now we're here in algebra 2 and we're doing it again. So pretty straightforward solving. Now this one's going to have a little bit tougher time. And this one you can kind of start to see when you look at this cross multiplication. That's going to give me an x squared. Now this cross multiplication is only going to give me 2x, so as I'm setting this up, I prefer the x squared to be first. Now, we need to multiply this. I'm going to kind of go over here to the side area up top, and I'm going to multiply that, because that's x minus 4 times x minus 3. That's distributive property big time. So, that times that is x squared. That times that is minus 3x. That minus 4x. And that plus 12. Be careful with the sign. Those are like terms, so this makes x squared minus 7x plus 12. That's your first cross multiplication. I'll go back over here with that. X squared minus 7x plus 12. That will be equal to the other cross product, which is more basic distributive property. So this is 2x minus 2 times 1, so 2. Now, folks, this brings about a different kind of solving. If you have x squared and x in the same solving problem, it's either going to be factoring or quadratic formula. That means you get everything to one side, keeping the x squared positive, and set equal to 0. And then we'll factor and or quadratic formula. Let's hope that it's a factoring that's a little bit less work. So I'm going to move both of these to the left at the same time, which means this, I'm going to subtract 2x, so I'll put it by its like term part, and this I'm going to add 2. See, the equal sign's right there, so it's once on each side. That's x squared minus 9x plus 14 equals gone, 0. We will attempt to factor this. X and x. Now, because that number's positive and that number's negative, I'm thinking minus minus, because that'll still multiply to positive. And when I see 14, I think 2 and 7. -2 times -7 is positive 14, and if I check this part of the distributive is -7x, that's -2x, and -7 and -2 are -9. We got a match. Set these two equal to 0 and solve. Add 2 for x equals 2, and add 7 for x equals 7. Now, one thing I'm going to mention here, people, because we're solving involving fractions. That's what the rational means, fraction. So all these rational expressions, rational equations these last few weeks. You need to sometimes, you should always check your answer, but you know, sometimes you just know, you're like, I did that right. I don't need to check. But what you need to check about some of these is that when you put, say, so for example, this answer is -6. If you put -6 in for these x's, first of all, you do want to make sure that the left side equals the right side, but you want to make sure that your denominator didn't turn to 0. For example, if x was equal to 2, no, it isn't, it's -6. But if x was equal to 2, 2 minus 2 would be 0, 1 divided by 0. You can't divide by 0, so you got to watch for that. It's not going to be as big an issue right now in this part, but the following part that'll come the week after, we're going to need to be checking that carefully. But if you just check this, you know, like -6 there would be 3, that's -24, 3 over -24. That reduces to -1/8. And if you put -6 right there, -6 minus 2 is -8, -1/8. So that checks. And you want to kind of look like, when I see these two, I'm really leery if one of my answers was x equals -2, because -2 plus 2 would be 0. Or if my answer was x equals 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. My answer is -10, so I'm feeling pretty comfortable. And over here, same deal. I'd feel uneasy if one of my answers was x equals 4, because 4 minus 4 gives me a 0 in the denominator, or if one of my answers was x equals 1. My answers were 2 and 7, so I'm feeling okay. But you should always kind of check anyway, just to see. But we got to really watch for that undefined situation to happen. It will become more popular. Now, in closing here, folks, pretty short video. I'm just hitting the 12-minute mark. So that's short compared to last week. Most of your assignment, I think 5 of your problems on your assignment are like this. They are straight up cross multiply, finish the solving. The end of the assignment, which I believe is an additional 4 questions, it's setting you up for next week. And you need to read those directions carefully, because it doesn't say to solve them they will have more than one fraction. They're going to go back and see if you can remember how to do your common denominator work that you did a couple weeks ago, and you actually did it this last week too, in the complex fraction assignment. Because they just say, what's the common denominator in this problem? And we'll use that the following week, and that's just kind of a precursor. So I'm not going to do any examples on that, because I've done examples on how do you find a common denominator in previous weeks. So just understand there's 5 problems like this for solving, and 4 problems of, do you remember how to find a common denominator? Okay? All right, take care, guys.